next speaker is Rosie Drysdale, and Rosie is a PhD student at Royal Holloway and supervised by Professor Manos Sakiris. Her PhD focuses on how infants develop an awareness of their body in relation to vision, touch, and internal bodily signals. And she's particularly interested in how early caregiver-infant interactions provide infants with an opportunity to learn about their body, and how mothers' awareness of their own body might influence this caregiving behaviour. And I think that's a bit about what she's going to talk to us about today. Are you there, Rosie?
Yeah, I'm right here. Thank you so much, Catherine. So I'll just start sharing my slides. Lovely. So as Catherine mentions, so my main research interests kind of look at the development of body awareness in infancy. So I'm a PhD student across 2 labs at Royal Holloway, University of London, and one of those is the baby lab, where I would look at development of body awareness in infancy. So as a result of COVID, unfortunately, I've not been able to invite families into our baby lab. But during this time, it's actually been a really brilliant opportunity for me to kind of explore this slightly new research focus, looking at kind of the experience, and mothers' experiences of their body during and after pregnancy. So today I'm going to talk to you about a study that was conducted earlier on this year, where we explored whether aspects of body awareness relate to mother-infant caregiving. So interoception is a really fundamental component of our body awareness. So interoception defines a process by which we can sense our internal bodily sensations. And this includes lots of different bodily sensations, including heartbeats, muscle tension, temperature, pain, hunger, and thirst, and many more. So as you can imagine, these are kind of constantly going on in the background. But we also very often become aware of how our body feels. This is particularly true when we experience immediate changes to our internal environment. So you might be able to imagine a situation where you're feeling quite cold. It's now winter time. Your body temperature is quite low, and then you get into a bath and you warm right up, and you start to kind of feel this real kind of warm body temperature. So this shows how kind of our senses of internal bodily sensations are really important in our awareness of our body. We also know that interoception plays a really important role in our perception of emotional states. So you can imagine a scenario where you might be getting a little bit fearful of having to talk in front of a lot of people, and you start to experience these internal bodily sensations that are associated with fear. So things like fast heartbeat, sweaty palms, or a dry mouth. So as I've already mentioned, there are many different internal bodily sensations, but in psychological research, we tend to focus on cardiac perception as a measure of interoception. So this is for several different reasons, one being that the heart provides a continuous signal and can be measured kind of really accurately and reliably using electrocardiogram or ECG. As I've already mentioned too, we know that the heart plays a kind of well-established role in emotion. So if we were to invite a participant into our lab to measure their interoception, we would ask them to take part in what we know as the heartbeat counting task. So we would measure a participant's heartbeat using the ECG, and we'd ask them to silently count their heartbeat in several short intervals. And by gathering these measures, we can get a measure of how accurate a person can count their heartbeats. In addition, we can also ask people to report on how aware they think they are of their internal bodily sensations. And of course, this is really useful in times like these where we can't always invite people to come into our lab. In addition, this kind of measure asks people to report their kind of general everyday experiences of internal bodily sensations that can't always be captured by the heartbeat counting task. So whilst the heartbeat counting task gets a measure of the accuracy in which people can detect their heartbeats, these kind of self-report questionnaires generally focus on how much attention people pay to these processes. So why is interoception important? So we know that interoception plays a really important role in our emotions and our ability to monitor changes in something like heartbeats is related to how intensely we experience emotions. So some research has suggested that people who experience cardiac signals more strongly also then in turn kind of experience emotions more intensely. So this ability to detect these internal signals is also related to then how we can regulate them as a response to an emotional event. So motherhood is kind of a period of many changes, both external changes to the way that the body looks, also internal changes that also relate to kind of the ability to regulate emotions and internal sensations. So researchers have suggested that specific brain changes during and after pregnancy facilitate this regulatory responding during caregiving and kind of prepare the mother into her transition into motherhood. So in the context of a mother-infant interaction, the threat detection brain network is activated, and this is kind of geared towards protecting the vulnerable infant. And at the same time, the mother's emotional regulation brain network is also activated, and this is thought to kind of help the mother regulate her own internal bodily signals and emotional signals in order to respond appropriately to her infant. So some research that supports this kind of these changes over pregnancy and motherhood show that mothers who are exposed to infant stimuli, so something like a baby crying, they have enhanced brain activity in these bodily and emotional regulation areas when they hear their own infant crying compared to when they hear another infant crying. We also know that when mothers are asked to do an emotional face matching task, where they see an emotional facial expression and they are asked to match as accurately and as quickly as possible the emotion that they think this facial expression is showing, between 48 hours and 1 month postpartum, mothers tend to show increased speed and accuracy in these tasks. So these studies suggest that over this period, this perinatal and postnatal period, there are kind of brain changes that facilitate this kind of transition into motherhood. However, whilst these studies have been really useful, they don't tell us much about how mothers actually adopt caregiving behaviours and whether this relates to their internal bodily detection and regulation. So this is really important because caregiving is inherently embodied. So from the very beginning, the baby's first experiences are embedded within the mother's own body. And after pregnancy, mother and baby continue to engage in these embodied interactions that kind of facilitate the sharing of emotional affection and kind of regulation. So it's thought that maternal interoceptive body awareness might influence how the mother can pick up on the infant's own bodily and emotional cues. And this is particularly true when before the child can speak, they have, they have many kind of bodily and emotional signals that the mother must be able to read in order to interpret how she can give caregiving behaviours to her infant. So whilst we know that caregiving behaviours kind of form these mechanisms through which the parent and infant can express affection and emotion, and they also kind of help to regulate and soothe the infant. So we know from studies that the frequency of touch, so more touch behaviours in a distressing situation, can help to reduce the baby's stress response and reduce their heartbeat and their arousal. And we think that this might be related to mother's interoceptive bodily awareness. So why do we think that this might relate to maternal interoception? So there's been a few really nice recent studies which have found that mother to infant stroking was associated with the mother's own heart rate. So in this study, when a baby was classified as calm during a touching episode, the baby was stroked by the mother more slowly when the mother had a slower heart rate, and more quickly with a mother with a faster heart rate. In addition, compared to static holding, mother to infant cuddling reduced cardiac arousal in the mother-infant dyad. And so these studies show that kind of internal bodily sensations play a really important role in early caregiving. And so our aim is to look at whether mothers' awareness and feelings towards their body might relate to their engagement in caregiving behaviours. So our study was an online study that consisted of several parental self-report questionnaires. So our sample consisted of 176 biological mothers with 6 to 18-month-old children, and our final sample consisted of 150 of these mothers. So our main variable of interest was the parent-infant caregiving touch scale, and this measures a frequency of a range of caregiving behaviours. And this includes holding type behaviours, so things like I hold my baby, cuddle my baby, kiss my baby, and rock my baby, as well as more communicative behaviours, so things like I watch my baby, talk to my baby, pick my baby up, or leave my baby to lie down. And lastly, this questionnaire is really nice because it has a specific subscale where it looks at the frequency of stroking, and it specifies the body location, which is something that hasn't been looked at a great deal in this area of research. And so whilst we want to make sure that parents who are and mothers who are reporting on this scale, that they the frequency of caregiving behaviours that they report they adopt in does actually reflect those behaviours in a kind of real life situation. And whilst I am not able to invite families into our baby lab at the moment, a previous study found that mothers who reported on these frequencies of caregiving behaviours, that actually did reflect the amount of touch that they adopted in an interaction with their child. So this is gives us some confidence that there's this consistency between what mothers are reporting that they adopt caregiving behaviours and how often they do this in a real interaction. So for our measure of interoception, we asked mothers to take part in the multidimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness. And this focuses on the tendency to pay attention to interoceptive bodily signals in daily life across various facets, including attentional, regulatory, and more distracting tendencies, or the tendency to trust your body. So some of the subscales include this ability to notice bodily signals. So this includes items like I notice changes in my breathing, such as whether it slows down or speeds up, to more regulatory body awareness, which includes items such as when I'm caught up in my thoughts, I can calm my mind by focusing on my body or breathing. And also things like distracting tendencies. So items such as I ignore physical tension or discomfort until they become more severe. And a higher score on this scale reflects a greater tendency to pay attention to and focus on these kinds of signals across these various facets. We also wanted to see whether body satisfaction during pregnancy plays a role in caregiving behaviours, because we know, of course, that mothers have to adapt to these changes in the appearance of the body. So because we recruited mothers who already had children who were between 6 to 18 months of age, we asked them to look back and reflect on their satisfaction towards their body during pregnancy. And to do this, we adopted Elizabeth and Catherine's scale, the Body Understanding Measure for Pregnancy, or nicely known as the BUMPS. So this includes several subscales that look at satisfaction towards appearance. So I liked it when people noticed that I was pregnant, to things like weight gain. So I worried about getting my figure back after pregnancy, as well as the physical burdens. So I got frustrated that I was less physically able than I was before. So some results. So we found overall that the frequencies of caregiving behaviours were associated with higher maternal self-regulation. So this means that mothers who reported engaging in more frequencies of all behaviours on the scale, so including all the holding, communication and the stroking behaviours, this was associated with higher reports of this tendency to regulate bodily signals. So an item on this subscale of the questionnaire includes, when I'm caught up in my thoughts, I can calm my mind by focusing on my body or breathing. We also found, when we looked more closely at the specific types of caregiving behaviours, that these were associated generally with kind of the attentional and regulatory aspects of body awareness. So again, this noticing of bodily signals, listening to them and regulating them and being aware of their emotional connection. So the specific caregiving behaviours that we found were related to these aspects of body awareness were stroking infant's arms and legs, rocking the infant, talking to the infant, and stroking the infant's back. So I just thought I'd include this little graph to show you kind of what these results mean. So along the bottom, you can see that this is the frequency of mother to infant stroking on the infant's arms and legs. And you can see here that, sorry, where's my mask on? So you can see that generally kind of mothers who reported lower frequencies also reported lower tendency to listen to their bodily signals. And this was kind of the case across all of these caregiving behaviours. So generally, mothers who reported higher self-regulation also reported higher tendencies to stroke their infant, rock their infant, and talk to their infant. So the key messages of these findings really are that interoceptive bodily awareness might be important for regulatory caregiving behaviours. So things like stroking, rocking, talking to versus holding and picking up. So we didn't find any relationships between holding and picking the infant up and any aspects of body awareness. So those aspects that were kind of mainly focused on related to these caregiving behaviours were these kind of noticing and regulatory aspects of body awareness. It's important to note here that we don't know the direction of this relationship. So it's possible that mothers who have a greater tendency to notice and regulate these bodily signals may then in turn be able to pick up on these signals in their own baby and then respond by adopting these caregiving behaviours. However, it's also possible that by adopting more of these caregiving behaviours, mothers may then be drawn to their own bodily signals. So we know that mothers and infants' kind of cardiac arousal can be reduced when the mother engages in things like cuddling and stroking. So the last results, we looked at pregnancy body satisfaction. So we did find that pregnancy body dissatisfaction was related to interoceptive body awareness. And this is consistent with what Kirk and Preston found. And we also found that pregnancy body satisfaction related to how often mothers reported engaging in caregiving behaviours. And this kind of occurred across more holding behaviours. And so kind of we know from previous evidence that embarrassment with changes to the appearance of breast shape can lead to mothers stopping breastfeeding early. And we also know that body satisfaction during pregnancy predicted how kind of close and attached the mother felt to her unborn baby. So whilst it's not clear what the direction is here, we think that our study kind of suggests that mothers' retrospective feelings towards the body during pregnancy may actually continue to play a role in mother-baby relationships, even many months following birth. So some of the mothers in this study had children who were 18 months. So it suggests that kind of their retrospective view of their body may remain important later on. So to conclude, this study provides new evidence that the way women subjectively perceive their body, both its appearance and its sensations, relates to how often they adopt caregiving behaviours with their infant. And it suggests that particular caregiving behaviours might relate to maternal interoception, and these were particularly involving regulatory behaviours. So just some limitations. The direction of the relationship cannot be inferred. We also, whilst we had 150 mothers, of course, we need to do a lot more research and look across different sample groups. So we need to be careful about how we generalise across here. And lastly, the subjective nature of self-report. So for the next steps, we're looking forward to following up the study with the mothers by hopefully adopting a kind of novel online heartbeat counting task. I can talk about this more in the questions because I know we're running out of time. We also want to look at their current body satisfaction to see if this might play a role. So thank you so much for listening. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Oh, that was a really fascinating talk. Thanks for that, Rosie. That was really,
Catherine, thank you.
and you know how interested I am actually in this area. I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about sort of brain changes that occur and after birth, and also sort of the stimuli of hearing babies crying, because I remember after my first was born, when he cried, I physically felt it. And I thought that was interesting. And is there much research looking at if there's difference between sort of first time mothers and second time mothers? Because I don't remember it to be so strongly with my second one, although
Yeah, I'm not sure. The research that I've kind of read up on mainly looks at non-parents versus parents. So I don't know how much research there's been on first-time mothers or second-time mothers. You might kind of sort of assume that, I guess, the first time around, it's a very kind of big change that you're really not used to, and whilst you can maybe prepare for it, it's really new, and you have to adapt to these changes. So I'm not sure how much research has been done on that, but it'd be really interesting to see, definitely.
yeah, so I guess it's more of a salient change the first time round because it's brand new. Um,
Exactly, yeah.
Also, maybe the mother's just a lot more busy because she's presumably got another child to look after, which is definitely the case. Did you look at that? Did you kind of control for things like whether, so thinking about the timing of these mothers after birth, so whether you looked at whether the mother had gone back to work or if they had many other children?
So we did get data on whether they had other children. I think I need to do some more analysis on that. I haven't actually looked at that relationship yet. But as far as kind of work commitments and things like that, we didn't look at those. And there are definitely other things as well that we think might be important. So I think because this was a first time study for us, we just wanted to look at the kind of main relationships. But absolutely, next time I think we'll be able to kind of focus a little bit more on the kind of personal experiences of motherhood and individual mothers, and how their kind of work commitments, or things like type of birth is quite an interesting one. So we wanted to perhaps look at whether mothers who had a natural vaginal birth or a C-section, but we haven't looked at any of those yet.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, I think someone actually asked that question about the type of delivery. So yeah, so what about the age of the infant? Because presumably they start to walk and stuff like that. Did you take that into account? Do you think that plays a role?
Sorry, you
The
mean?
age of the infant, the infant's age in terms of the amount of care, the stroking and cuddling. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. So something I didn't have enough time for to sort of discuss in this talk was that we found kind of a really big variation in the frequency of stroking towards the infants across age groups. And so it seemed that across all different age groups, there was a large variation in how much mothers adopted stroking behaviours. Well, this wasn't true for holding and more kind of communicative behaviours. So that's really interesting, because there's a lot of research on mother to infant stroking and the benefits of this, but it shows that this might not be maybe reaching kind of new mothers, and so there must be a really big kind of variation in how frequently they adopt these types of caregiving behaviours. So that's definitely something we want to look at in the future.
and it might also depend on sort of the characteristics of the baby. Some babies are very hyperactive, and others.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was thinking about how, some babies who maybe don't sleep very well, they might respond really well to certain caregiving behaviours like stroking, or they might not respond to them well at all. Other kind of influences like mobility, if they're some babies, like you said, are walking much later on, um, others walk very early. So there's definitely, I think, what I got from the results was that there are individual differences that probably drive this variation more than perhaps age group necessarily.